Welcome to the Soul Elevation Podcast, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. I want to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is sacred geometry. If you're watching the video, and actually, if you're listening to the audio podcast, you might want to watch the video, which is easy to find on soulelevationpodcast.com. But I will try to put some of the images in the show notes. I just don't know, depending on where you get your audio podcast, it might be difficult for you to see the show notes, or they may not come through in that platform. It goes out to so many different places like Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio and Spotify, and they all sort of do things differently. So I just put it in one place and it goes out automatically to everywhere, but I can't guarantee that based on how you're listening that you'll be able to see the images. But if you go on the website, I have brought some images. You can watch the video directly through the website or on YouTube on the channel Soul Elevation Podcast, and you can see what I want to share. But you can see behind me, for those watching the video, that I always have in the background this sacred geometry pattern behind me as some artwork, and I can see that yeah, you can see it. Anyway, and that was created by Andre Balog, who was a guest on my podcast earlier this year. And he has a lot of sacred geometry. In fact, for my birthday, I got a book of his that he talks about in the podcast. And I love, this is just a representation of sacred geometry. So you can see in this sacred geometry, there is the star tetrahedron, there's Metatron's cube, we've got some octagons in there. So there are lots of different geometries all nested, and of course you see spheres in there, circles, but all making up kind of one design, but it's a lot of different patterns that are in there. And I like to create sacred geometry, but I go in phases. And so I'll have long periods of time where I just don't make time for it. Things get busy and it just doesn't come to mind. But when I do, sometimes I will just get this inspiration that is like, make time to do sacred geometry. And I had one of those recently where it was like my reward for getting through a bunch of stuff that I had built up that needed to get finished was going to be that I was going to take some time to do some sacred geometry. And it's always mysterious circumstances as to why I get those hits of it's time to do sacred geometry. And it's not like a complete cause and effect. It's not like I do sacred geometry and then something that something very practical comes in and is the result of that. I mean, of course, there are the drawings, but it seems like there is this higher aspect of my consciousness that knows more than I do and is like, if you engage with this, things will come in for you. And I don't necessarily know what that is, and it's not even like I'm doing the sacred geometry for that, but I notice that things do start to, things do start to come in. For example, with this past one, there was an abundance factor where kind of some unexpected abundance came through right after the sacred geometry had happened. And I love sacred geometry because there are a lot of different aspects of life that it interacts with. So it helps our right and left brains to be able to talk to each other better, to connect. It makes balances the left and right hemispheres of the brain. There's something in the action of creating the sacred geometry and perhaps even just looking at the sacred geometry. But I know for me, as I'm drawing it, there is this balance that comes through. There's this creative side. The right brain is the creative side. The left brain is the more analytical side, but when you're doing sacred geometry, it is very balanced. It's harmonious, it's structured. And so I think that's why it does both. It's not so abstract where there's form, there's function, there are angles, there's precision. And so I think that's why it gets that left hemisphere involved, but it's also bringing, of course, the creativity. It's opening and unlocking things with the right side of the brain. But one of the things that really struck me, I was doing some new geometries I hadn't done before, which are 9-sided geometries, nanograms. And so I was creating this image. Actually, this is 18. Beg your pardon. This is 18. So I took the 9, but there are 18 points in this geometry. And so I was going to create this. And as I began, this was the first iteration of this. So this is like one of the 18 points being connected, because with this design, you are connecting all 18 points to every other point. And with this, let me try to get it into focus a little bit better here. There. This, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is one dimension moving into another dimension. This is how I see that. And I was just like, okay, I have to stop with this, because this to me is the movement of dimensionality. When energy or beings are able to move into from one dimension to another, this is how I see it. That there is, so let's say this is a dimension. Let's say this is the 5th dimension, and it is radiating out and then concentrating itself into another dimension. And it's like the dimensional access is this, like this portal here that you see in the middle, but it's kind of gathering from these dimensions that we can't see. I don't know how, sometimes words, I'm like trying to find the words to explain it. But like when I think of, let's say, a human being, we know that the human being, from an energetic standpoint, is a toroidal field. It is this like donut of energy that's constantly moving, but that energy is coming from a source that is a higher dimension than we have, and we can't see it. We don't see beyond 3 dimensions here. We've got from the physical aspect, we have height, width, and depth, and that is how our dimension is structured. But there are more aspects that are around us that are multidimensional, and this just really stopped me in my tracks. So I wanted to share that. And again, I don't know that my words are really doing justice to what I was seeing captured in this, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you understand my words or not, because I believe that our brains just do something. Our consciousness does something. And just looking at images like this can help to unlock things within us. So I'm just showing you this, and I'm putting some words around it to try to explain what it meant to me. But if that is confusing or it's not quite coming together in the, words are limiting. But you can let go of my explanation if it doesn't make sense, but just let the image do whatever it wants to do. And you don't have to even know what it's doing. You don't have to be able to say, oh, when I look at this, I feel this, or I recognize this. It doesn't matter. You just absorb it. And so I'm going to do the same thing with the one that I showed before. And this is that 18 pointed star. This one I posted on Instagram I have my Instagram is Kara_Goodwin_meditation. I'm pretty sure. Sorry that it's a little bit blurry here. But what I love about this is these are all straight lines. But what do you see here? What do you see in the middle? And then you see just around that, and you go out again, and you see another. There are these concentric circles that are created, but these are literally this is made entirely of straight lines. I used a ruler. I mean, they're very, very straight lines. You can see that on the outside, it looks like, there's a circle out there. It looks like a sphere. It looks like there's depth to this. So I found that really interesting that we can, it's definitely an optical illusion. And then this was another version of the 18-pointed star, or not star, but 18-sided, 18-pointed geometry. And I didn't go as far with this one as I did in the previous one, but I like the nested look of this. And this, is they all have a portal quality to them, but this is a great one. They're all great to meditate on, but another thing that you can do if you actually create geometry is after you've created it, you can take your finger and you can just very slowly draw with your finger over it, all the shapes, and just let that be a meditation where your mind kind of frees up. And that's your activity. That can be very, very meditative, to just draw your finger across or around the geometry. And then the final one that I want to share is this is a nonogram. This one is 9-sided. And I just really love this one. I love how it pulls you in. And again, these are completely straight lines, but it looks like it's curved. It looks like it's pulling your attention in. This one, because it is 9-sided, that's another really good one to just draw your um, your finger and keep going around and around and around as a meditation practice. But this is a great one to just let yourself, and 9 is a sacred number. You may be aware of that, but just to let yourself kind of be pulled in there. One thing that you can do with sacred geometry, if you're interested in drawing it, first of all, if you're interested in drawing it and you don't know where to start, I do have a workshop that I hosted last year that it's still available for purchase, as a record. You can engage with the recordings. It was 3 2-hour sessions, and I share with you all the materials that I love to get to help you to do it, and then you learn several of the geometries, you learn how to make it. And so that's a great resource to start with. But if you already know how to do sacred geometry, or if another idea, I've not done this, but you could search for them online and then you could print them out. And then you could use like a ruler to trace them. I use a compass, and for me, that's an important part of it, is using the compass. Rather than just going straight to a ruler. Like, I don't usually measure from one point to another. I let the compass do it. But I forget what I was going to say about that, because I went off track when I was saying if you wanted to learn how to do it. If you draw it, I was saying something about if you draw it. Forgive me. But it is it's a mystical experience when you start engaging with it. And again, particularly when you start drawing it, or you can also take it a step further. A lot of these I just drew, but you can color them as well. And I've got, like here's a tesseract, and I colored the tesseract. And that's another way it's just another like deepening of the engagement of the geometry, because the more that you're looking at it, the more it is imprinting in your consciousness. And it's important for me to share too that one of my early awakening experiences was I was going to bed, and I had been meditating for, I want to say, like maybe 2 years at this point. So it wasn't like was just awakening, but it was a long time ago now. And I couldn't fall asleep. I was excited about something. I had just started this retreat that I was excited about, and I was kind of like high vibes from it. And it was taking me a long time to fall asleep. And all of a sudden, in that time where I was definitely awake, but I was trying to fall asleep, I saw these shapes came and flashed in my vision, in my inner vision. And it was like, and I don't remember how many of them flashed, but it was so shocking to me. Like I was like, what in the world was that? What just happened? I didn't know. I don't think I'd ever even heard of sacred geometry. I definitely hadn't drawn any or sought it out or studied it. There was color to it as well. It was very, very fast, but it was like these flashes of different shapes came in. And I didn't know what to do with that. Luckily, I had just met Michael Massey, who, if you've read my book, Your Authentic Awakening, I talk a lot about Michael because he was a really important spiritual mentor for me for a few years. And he knew what sacred geometry was. And actually, but I didn't know him very well. I think I had gone on a tour with him in Sedona. That's how I met him. He was a spiritual vortex tour guide. And then I wanted to have him on the podcast. So I think we talked once prior to me interviewing him on the podcast. And then maybe we'd done the podcast by then. I can't even remember. I don't even know that we had done the interview. So I'd only talked to him a couple of times, but I was able to share with him what had just happened. And then he was able to kind of talk me through what that was. And but it does seem that it was some sort of activation. And when I say activation, I just mean that it ignites a new level of consciousness or a new, you can think of it as like maybe I went through a consciousness portal and something opened up to me. I had access to a new level of consciousness. So that happened spontaneously. But the reason that I want to share that is because the innocence, like I didn't know what it was that I was even seeing. So these shapes, these geometric shapes, they have been studied and drawn since antiquity. We go back to Pythagoras and Plato and the Greek philosophers. This was a really important aspect of their studies and work. Um, but it's like this, it is this fundamental part of our consciousness. And so when we do things like draw it or meditate on it, color it, we are engaging with it, and our eyes are getting those visual cues. We're absorbing the angles and the shapes, and we also find these angles and shapes all through nature. But it does help our consciousness to kind of organize itself and arrange itself. And if you think of your energy fields as being these nested layers, I believe that the sacred geometry can help us to get those into more balance and more alignment, which helps us to live with greater ease. It helps us to be aligned so that higher um, aspects, higher timelines, higher, however you want to think of it, but that we can be more in alignment with spirit, live from a more aligned place. And that can help everything to balance and to flow in to benefit us in our regular non meditative life, our everyday life. So I encourage you to explore sacred geometry. I'll put a link in the notes to my conversation with Endre, the artist of the work behind me, so that you can listen to that if you want to dive into this a little deeper. Definitely feel free to check out my course on sacred geometry. I'll put a link for that in there too. And I have a feeling if you're engaging with this talk right now, sacred geometry might just find you too. So just pay attention because you may, it's just funny how creation works like that. So you may see more or start to notice more sacred geometry showing itself to you. So thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this live or this weekend, today's July 29th, Saturday, July 29th, I'm going to be speaking at the Great Remembrance Summit, which is happening today and tomorrow for the Portal to Ascension. So please join me. I'll also try to remember to put a link to that in the show notes as well. I'd love to see you there. So many blessings. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.